Hello and welcome to the Counterpoint podcast. Today we're going to be talking about 5G smartphones, and in relation to that, also the ongoing shortage of components that we're seeing, and the impact of both of these things in the wider smartphone market. So I'm joined today by two of my colleagues. We have Research Director Brady Wong and Research Analyst Parv Sharma. Hi guys, how are you today?
Hello, Peter.
Hello, Peter. All good.
Good to hear your voices, guys.
Yeah, same here.
Cool. So the transition to 5G is one of the biggest trends in the industry right now. However, it's been occurring during this COVID-19 pandemic and geopolitical tensions. Both of these things have caused disturbances in the overall electronic supply chain. So today, what we're going to discuss is, how these developments are impacting the market, especially for 5G smartphones, and what are our expectations for growth in the market during the rest of 2021. So, if I can start, the first wave of 5G smartphones, which was first half of 2019. They were priced well over $1,000. But by the end of last year, the end of 2020, we saw 5G smartphones with pricing, below $200 in China. So, can we talk a little bit about what the factors that contributed to this rapid decline? Was it just demand, or was it the entire value chain that was pushing for more affordable 5G smartphones? Maybe Brady, if you can start, and then Parv will come to you in a second.
Yeah, so it starts from the 2019, and we see the price drop for 5G is driven by the operators in China, and also the driving cost from the component, right? And Chinese government is pushing the 5Gs in especially the 5G infrastructure and the smartphone, right? And also Chinese smartphone OEM are eager to take the market of 5Gs, right? All of that make the price of 5G smartphone decline.
Parv, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, as Brady mentioned, like over a period of time, anyways, the prices decline, but we have seen some steep like decrease in the prices of phones in geographies like China and even in some other countries. Even in India, we have seen a massive decline and launches for 5G phones below like around $200 and even below $200 in China. So the key thing to notice here is that in countries like India, we don't even have a 5G network that is live. So to pick up few of the things like that have brought the cost down, I would say is that the faster availability of the chipsets as well as RF components, even in the mid-end segment, and even the huge competition that was there from the Chinese OEMs to like have these devices in the mid-end segment, which will drive the overall volumes, right? So they were always ready to like have anything that was very competitive and with a price and a spec level that was comparable to already the 4G phones which were there in those segments. So the decrease in these chipset prices, especially if you look at from MediaTek, which came back with the competitive offerings, and this, I guess, one of the one of the reasons that brought the prices very quickly like down in 2020 and 2021 as well.
Now, we're currently kind of undergoing this global chip shortage, and this is seen most acutely, I think, in the auto industry, where we've seen factories having to cease production due to the lack of components. But these shortages are also extending to the smartphone market as well, right? And will that impact the ability for the smartphone market to continue to bring pricing down? What do you say, Pav?
So Peter, we are already seeing some prices of going up, because even players like Qualcomm, they are having some shortages with Samsung foundries, and overall, even if you look at with the 8-inch fabs, the RF components, the prices are going higher, since I guess the overall demand went down during the COVID, and the lead times for the foundries are always like higher, towards like 15 weeks and higher or so. So anyways, this is going to take time, and most likely in the second half we might see the supply chain coming back to normal, but still we are seeing a little bit of the price rise that is there for some key components.
Hmm. So Brady, is it fair to say that that the shortages of components in the smartphone space are actually more acute in 4G than 5G? So there's a better availability of 5G chipsets and supporting components than there is in the 4G world, or is it not quite so straightforward as that?
I think it is. The global chip shortage problem actually started from smartphones such as PMIC, PMIC, and the CMOS image sensor, which need more in 5G smartphone, and they are primarily produced of 8-inch wafer, right? And last year, the early recovery of China's smartphone market in the second half, coupled with the U.S. ban on Huawei and the increased part inventory by handset smart makers and ODM, all of this lead the global shortage of chips. And now we do see the more shortage in 4G, especially the AP, right? So yeah. So I think the shortage will impact 4Gs more than 5Gs.
So, kind of taking that forward, then, I mean, is that going to be a driver for faster uptake of 5G during 2021, or is it that we've seen pricing coming down quite fast, but now with component shortages, pricing might stabilize, and in fact, in some components, even going up. So, where do we think the pricing will settle for a 5G smartphone this year? And I think we've seen the lowest pricing in China, so maybe we should touch on China, but also US, which has a slightly different set of circumstances because there's the existence of millimeter wave there with some carriers. Europe is maybe a bit cleaner, and then we obviously have a number of Asian markets, and Parv, you mentioned India, where 5G is not even available yet, but there's quite a big market for 5G smartphones. So taking all these things together, where do we think pricing is going to settle during this year? Parv, what's your view?
So Peter, if we look at the overall market, so we still believe that its average selling price, it's still going to be around $550, or even some bit more for the 5G handsets. But we are already seeing the launches in the mid-end segment below $300, and even if you look at China, it's just around $180 as well. So the pricing part, it's really like coming down back to the 4G segment as well. If you look around $200, it's all 4G, right? So uh, recently, like even in the first half, we will still see launches in the markets like India, or even like there is a vast market in APAC, even Middle East, mostly Africa, so that are still catering to 4G, right? So anyways, like having an extra bill of material cost for 5G, and even RF as well, that adds to that 5G cost. So in the countries like Africa, in some APAC countries, so it's still be dominant with 4G if you look in 2021, and the pricing, I think, for the average ASP, if you look, would be still like, if for the cheaper, would be still close to $300. We will see launches in sub $200 as well, but that might not drive much volumes. And for the US market, if you look, like mostly it's the Apple and the Samsung, mostly the premium market driving the 5Gs. And as you mentioned, the millimeter wave is there as well, so pricing is a little bit higher for millimeter wave, as we have seen that. I guess for the Galaxy Note 20, we saw there was a 10% increase in the price for sub 6 versus millimeter wave phone. So this is on the bill of material side of things. So it's a bit pricier to launch phones with the millimeter wave, as we need to have extra AIPs, the NT9 package modules. So pricing for US market, it's still like on the higher side. But if you look at the prepaid segment, which caters towards this mid end and low end segment phones, so we have already seen launches from TCL, Motorola's. So we'll see, I guess, the close to overall, I guess we will see penetration of around 65 to 67% in US market in the year 2021 for 5G.
So, Brady, turning to you, we've seen the component shortages. We've talked a bit about that. Now, we're seeing some pricing rising. I think on some components, PMICs that you mentioned, display driver ICs, there is some increase in pricing. And we're even seeing price increases on some rather generic passive components. So, is this just a sort of supply demand situation, or is there something underlying going on that we'll see these prices sort of stay firm throughout 2021?
Yeah, I think the shortage now is not just a PMIC or display driver IC or CMOS. It has moved to the others like a PCB or passive component, as I mentioned, right? So, and also what's more, the distributor in the supply chain are also increasing their inventories, and they are driving the price up, right? So overall, this year we will continue, at least for the first half of this year, the price of the component will continue to increase. Yeah, and also the lead time will be longer than before.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So, the overall supply chain is under a bit of stress. I mean, I think it's quite good for some component vendors because they can sell everything that they can make, and their inventories are low. So, from a pure kind of revenue and profitability point of view, it's good, but it does put a lot of strain on the overall sort of smartphone market, right? But kind of looking a bit at millimeter wave, because Parv, you mentioned that this is millimeter wave components add quite a bit of cost to the basic bill of material cost. And I think when we started out looking at this, it was around $100. So is that delta closed now?
So Peter, it's up to like how many the AIPs OEM is using. So like if you look at Samsung, they were using close to 3 AIPs, and then Apple came with iPhone 12 and they introduced a newer AIP with their own newer packaging, and so they drive a cost a bit down, but it's still higher if we compare it with the sub 6 phones.
So, okay. So if we look at across the world at where spectrum has been licensed, millimeter wave spectrum is in use in the USA, but it has been licensed in quite a few other markets. But I don't think there are many operators that have launched, mobile broadband services on millimeter wave. I think that's mostly just in the USA, right? So, where do we sort of see the percentages of millimeter wave devices versus sub 6 5G smartphones? How should we kind of think about the proportion of each?
Okay, so yeah, it's a very interesting, like you mentioned, the millimeter wave auctions going on, and even the devices were there in countries, only were there in US, but we have seen the spectrum launches, the spectrum auctions being there in Japan, Korea, even Australia, in Italy as well. But still we haven't seen any devices with millimeter wave being launched there. So in 2021, I guess still the most of the volumes might be coming from the US market. So if we look at 2020, it was around 10% of the total 5G shipments were of millimeter wave. That was specifically from US. And as per our estimates, I think we are close to at 8% of the total 5G volumes in 2021. But the other thing to that is that the overall 5G shipments are growing to get doubled in 2021. So we might see some phone launches in Australia, or even in Japan, but we are still not sure about like the millimeter wave being a mainstream in 2021. Maybe once China launches somewhere around mid 2022, we might see the more penetration for millimeter wave globally.
Right, right. And I think, what we saw when iPhone 12 was launched was that really helped to make 5G mainstream. Speaking for Europe, for example, so countries like the UK, Switzerland are very strongly iPhone orientated. Very high percentage of the install base is with Apple. So without iPhone, the market wasn't really there for 5G. So Apple has really kind of helped to make the 5G market come alive in many of these markets. China, however, we saw in 2020 had been a really strong driving market. So they had a very high percentage of smartphone sales that were 5G. With iPhone now in the markets in Europe, US, China as well, of course, but Japan, Korea, which are also very favorable for Apple. So will we see the other big markets start to catch up with China this year?
So if you look at the other markets, definitely the one of the other reason there is that most of the phones in the premium segment going 5G, irrespective a country has a 5G network or not, right? If you look at the S21 or even the iPhone 12, it's 5G globally. So even if a country has no 5G network, the device is already there with 5G capabilities. So definitely the percentage is it's going to increase.
Yeah. Okay. Something that we saw in the initial phase of 5G was quite heavy subsidies being applied by operators. So Korean operators I think they were actually kind of breaking their own regulatory environment in Korea and subsidizing 5G devices very heavily. We've seen something similar in the US, not direct subsidies, but at least very generous exchange offers and some big discounts. So, do we think that this sort of promotional activity is going to be needed to drive 5G, or we've kind of got over the hump now, and it's just going to be for many markets, 5G is just going to be the sort of standard for most consumers?
Yeah, Peter. So very interesting point. So if you look at the overall the scenario for promotions, mostly the markets that you said, US was not direct subsidy, but the promotions were always there, and even like if you look at with bundling of services like the game services or the VR services, and even their plans, they tried to push up their user base towards an unlimited plan so they can get a 5G for instead of using a 4G plan. So earlier we saw people using a 4G plan for a 5G devices in some countries. But specifically, if you look at the operators, they tried pushing the ASP higher with bundling more services, plus uh, giving the 5G as a complementary plan on a unlimited higher premium plans. But still, if you look at in some countries where there is still no 5G, so people will still be looking out like what's the difference, and how will it compare to 4G. So we'll continue to see promotions in other countries as well.
Yes, in China, we do not expect carrier will offer heavy discount or offers than before. to drive the 5G smartphone sales. Because now 5G smartphone in China is almost the mainstream, right? So they don't need to drive the 5G smartphone sales by heavy discount like they did before.
So, bringing this sort of discussion on 5G smartphones to a bit of a conclusion, what do we think is the likely percentage? Either and you can answer this any way you like, but the percentage share that 5G will have of the smartphone market, or growth that we're expecting to see in 2021. Parv, if I can start with you.
So, Peter, if you look at the growth for 5G, the shipments are going to get doubled. So it was close to 250 million units in 2020, and I guess it will cross around 500 plus, even close to 550. And this is in line with uh, uh, most of the chipset vendors as well. They are like anyways going above 500 million for their own chipsets or for the 5G market. So I think we are at almost the double of what we were in 2020 for 5G shipments.
Okay. And Brady, if I can give you the last question to deal with. So we've talked a lot about smartphones in 5G here, but 5G opens up opportunities in a number of different areas. And I know you're very interested in the VR market, for example, in drones. These are all sectors that have been talked about in relation to 5G. So, do we expect to see 5G technology coming to these sectors in 2021? It's something that is likely to happen, further out.
I think this year, 2021, I don't expect to see 5G will be used in other devices such as VIR or the drone, Yeah, because the sub-6 gigahertz 5G, the speed of light is still too low for the drone or the VR. Okay, so but however, next year, as we see China promoting the millimeter wave infrastructures, and we may see some new applications with the 5Gs in drones or in the other devices.
And just last question. In the automotive sector, obviously they're going through quite a bit of stress at the moment. But again, 5G has been talked about as a critical technology for developments in the automotive sector. I mean, I've been a bit skeptical because I think, in relation to autonomous vehicles, where it's most normally talked about, for me, an autonomous vehicle must be autonomous, which means that it must be able to manage by itself without having recourse to, network resources. But what's your view on the auto sector relative to 5G?
That should be. We should see that maybe 5 years later or even longer, because as you say, autonomous vehicle has to be autonomous independently, right? However, you also need the V2X or the other infrastructures to get the signal from other vehicle or communicate with other vehicle, right? And but again, sub-6 gigahertz, the speed of that is still not good enough, and also the bandwidth of that now is still not high enough for the 5G connected automotive. We may see that in some kind of the connected devices in the automotive, but we will not see that be used to determine the autonomous functions of the vehicle.
Great. Hey, guys, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you for your time as well. Thank you, Brady.
Hey, and everyone else, thanks for listening. And please do check in with us for the next installment of the Counterpoint podcast. Have a great day. Bye now.